challenging the norms, yes, there are certain parts of me that I have very well established that are, and that I've always felt, especially as a safety professional, as a leader of people, that you have to know certain things about yourself that you will stand on, irrespective of what will happen. That you believe that so much that people know that if she's there, if she's doing that, there's no question about where she stands. And I've had those certain things of knowing within me that have just been completely firm. But then getting deeper into what you're saying, that really knowing and saying, and I thought about this at another podcast that I was doing, and the intro of myself, and I thought, they may want to hear the whole kind of rundown that you could see on my LinkedIn or whatever, but that's not who I am. That's not who I am. That's what I've done. And it's part of what's made me who I am. But that's not who I am.
Hey everybody, welcome to Finding the Upside. Thanks so much for joining us today. Today I am in the studio with another episode of One Tough Chick, and I'm super excited to welcome my guest, Marla Corson. Welcome, Marla.
Thank you. Pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited to talk with you today. So I want to just give a introduction to who Marla is, and we're going to start talking about her journey. She certainly is one tough chick. She is a leader. She has spent years in corporate. Her most recent role was at Amazon, which she left earlier this year and started her own consulting business. She is a force to be reckoned with, and we like to highlight, especially on this series of One Tough Chick, women in business, strong leaders, people who have navigated, whether they founded their own company or transitioned from a corporate role into owning their own business and being their own boss, or navigating challenges. And the point of this is we hope to inspire more women to understand what they're capable of and be more and do more. So welcome.
Thank you.
So Marla, as I said in the intro, talk to me about your journey. How did you get from your corporate position to here in owning your own consulting business? And what was that journey like? Just give us a kind of condensed version of what your path has been.
Well, if I just take my path from corporate to where I am today, and I actually left Amazon the end of 2022, so I was the very end of 2022. And I actually went to work for another company for just a couple months in 2023. Not a great choice. But the good thing of that is that I think that opened me up to saying, what other things do I really want to do? And where do I really want to be? And what are I really believe that we have some innate talents and gifts that we should use. And I spent a lot of time, thinking about that. And fortunately I could, I didn't have to be, like I had been literally on call 24/7, 365 for the last 20 years in the world of safety. So it was nice to take a step back from that. And I almost felt like I was almost detox, I tell you, because of just the intensity of the work environments that I've been in. And as you grow in leadership positions, it's a little bit more and more. So it was almost like a detox.
Wow.
And then I decided May of this year that, I'll start my own LLC. I will consult myself and I'll speak. And some things that I have wanted to do, but have thought, can I really? Should I? Maybe not. And then just actually was talking with a friend and a colleague, and I think we were at the shipyard or something in Philadelphia and saying, why don't we do this? And we had both left Amazon at the same time, and we said, we should. And so just did.
You know what, I'd love to follow up on just a couple things that you mentioned. You talked about, and I, like you, spent 20 years in corporate America and, for the last 15 years or so with my own business, but that's a transition. And when you're used to that programming and that, model and that way you work, you talked about needing a detox, because in that type of role, most leadership roles, honestly, but you were in safety and compliance, correct? So, obviously, there's things that happen all the time. You're trying to keep people safe. And what did you have, 3,500 people?
3,500 people on my team.
On your team,
And then we had, nearly 300 warehouses across the U.S. and Canada, nearly 800, probably over 800,000 people, associates at any given time. So it was a huge responsibility.
Huge responsibility.
Yeah.
But I hear that a lot in your corporate role. Most corporate role, you're so in the trenches that you don't have the time to kind of sit back and then think, reflect. And that's a problem, it's a blind spot for good leadership. But so it's interesting how you termed that you needed a detox, and that is what allowed you to kind of breathe. Again, fortunate that you could do that, right? But sometimes I think, that's the upside, for lack of a better word, of transitioning out of a W-2 position and a salaried position into something independent, is that you have more freedom. You have more of the ability to kind of think about, what do you want to do? What are you good at? What are you passionate about? So I love that, and that's actually really common to a lot of people that I talk to that have had that path. Tell me, what are the things that you think, because I do want to touch on this for others. You said that there were things that you thought, I have talents, and could I do this? What do you think it is that causes us to doubt what we are possibly capable of? I mean, I have my own feelings, but I'd love to hear from your perspective what you think.
Yeah. I think it's a couple things. I think we get so programmed. I think we're actually pre-programmed. Almost our whole system here in the United States, and when I'm blessed to, be a U.S. citizen, of course, so I'm not downing that. But the system that we have, you go through this, structured school, and then for me, I was in a structured military, and then you go into a structured job, and it's everything. It is designed for progression, and you either are progressing or you're moving forward or you're falling behind. And my personality was just very much achieve. And I think in that process, you begin to see the things that you're good at, and you move that and you grow. And obviously, I had those things and had great successes, but I think you get so ingrained into that you don't allow yourself to step back and say, wow, when I did that, or when I was engaged with that, mentoring program or this development, helping someone, or whatever it is, you say, wow, I felt really good about that. That really, lights something up inside me. So I think we have these flashes all along the way, but we're so programmed to work the way that we do. That we don't take the time to listen. And I think that sometimes, and even for me, I think I was so engaged in what I was doing. And safety is so important because you're literally responsible for the lives of people. And I took that so seriously, that I was so intense into that I wasn't allowing myself to think about other things. And because it's always the path, you just stay on it. When you took a moment to reflect of maybe something else, you just jump right back in it, and there's another thing to achieve, and you just keep going and keep going and keep going. And so I think it's just the following that path, following that kind of design structure that most of my lifetime has been about. And not taking time to just say, do something different. And then also just believing enough. I think I've always believed in myself, but being willing to just say, you know what, I'm going to make just a complete change. And it's different. It's very different.
Well, I also think that, and I had a guest on a couple weeks ago, and we were talking a lot about this. I think that in our culture, in this country at least, we are so focused on what we do. And that becomes our identity. It's not about who we are, right? It's kind of baked in, as you were talking about. It's this, how we work, this hustle, this grind. And listen, I had to reconcile myself. The hustler got me where I am. But I had to unravel. It took me a long time, honestly, 15 years being in my own business, to break that. What you said about the next project. we've got to make space for reflecting and learning and the emotions and the things we feel when we did that, how we feel good. It's kind of anti-business culture, right?
100%.
We don't make space for that, and we need to.
Yeah.
Because in my view, it's not a warm and fuzzy thing that doesn't help business. It actually enhances what people are capable of and what people do. And it actually also the work becomes more fulfilling then.
100%.
Because you have those reflections of, wow, we did this, or wow, I did this. But you're absolutely right. There's no space for that. So part of that, I do believe, is because I am a this. It's instead of, who are you as a person? Right. I stand for this. I believe in this.
Right.
This is important to me. All those things that make up who we are. So I think it's a path that I've walked as well. It's one that in my mission, to talk about creating these cultures that make space for that. And to be honest, I think, the generations coming up are demanding that now.
Yeah.
Who knows what's going to happen, in the coming years. But, the traditional business, as you know, my rail against traditional leadership and traditional business practices or corporate think is exactly this, let's find new ways that are actually going to be more fulfilling for people and actually then create the loyalty and the great work and the engagement that business is looking for.
Right. And the innovation.
And the innovation,
all of it. Yeah.
Creativity, all of those things. Yeah. Well, let me ask you this. You mentioned your military background. Did you find that it was the same with regard to this culture that we're talking about with doing and tactical and all of that? Or was there some space for some self-discovery in that? Or was that part of the process?
Some ways it was almost identical. And there are a couple things that make it the same for me is I have always worked in a predominantly white male-led organization.
Yeah.
In fact, not predominant, I always have. In the military, my entire career, with the exception of one period of time working for a woman, it's all been really white men.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm half white, so it's not like I'm saying that it's nothing
totally
about...
understand.
But that's it, and that creates a framework in and of itself, and one that as a woman and as a Black woman you have to navigate differently. So that's a whole other topic. But I think the military, I think that structure was the same. I think the difference with the military was that especially when you're outside, you're overseas, the connectivity that you have with people is different because you really do know one mission and you're aligned to that mission.
Okay.
And even if you don't agree with every part of that mission, you're aligned to that mission.
You're aligned to that mission.
And you're all in this one goal, and you're all in this together. You're all really going towards the same end.
Okay.
Now, there's still the room to be, the best, which I've always strived for that, but you're still one mission. And that makes it a little bit different. I think in corporate America, you come into an environment where there are more people, especially in environments where there are a bunch of type A personalities of, this one wants this mission, this has got to be it, this has got to be it, this is, and
so it detracts from that one goal.
And then that's what creates these kind of divisions with people, creates silos in organizations, and creates, and sometimes forces people into that structure. Doesn't always allow for people who want to be more reflective or be less vocal or things like that. So I think that structure didn't allow in the military and doesn't allow for different reasons in corporate America.
Yeah. But it's interesting that you say that, and that would be my assumption. Obviously, I've not served, I've not been in the military, but you have to be focused on that one goal, right? And I think that's a difference that is an advantage versus the corporate business, because of what you just explained. I use the sports analogy all the time. It's like, if the goal is that we want to win, even if it's as simple as that, we want to win this game, everybody's got to be focused on what needs to be done together to do that.
And what their part is in that.
Right. Yeah. It can't be, oh, I want the ball more, or why are you picking him over me? It can't be that. And my experience as well in corporate America and in corporations, we have this ecosystem that creates that with this division, and I don't agree, and obviously we need healthy differences. That's what makes us, right? Mm-hmm. The ability to do that, but it's a competitive, I think, nature about what's better, what's this, and that detracts from accomplishing the common goal.
Right.
And from a team's perspective and a culture perspective, you can't have that. But I think that's sad that even as you're saying, in the military, it was like you can't really be reflective, I don't know. Like sometimes you kind of have to be, I think, in order to know if what you're doing is aligned to the mission or aligned to.
And I think I don't think there's any reason you can't be. I think my personal experience is that I was always driven to be the best, to achieve, to go this way. And because I didn't think I had any other options.
Understood.
In the environments that I've been in.
Yeah.
Right. And so maybe I brought some of that on to myself, not sure. But I see, I don't think it was all myself because I see other people doing that. And I think especially.
I think it creates that.
Yeah, it does.
Well, obviously, and this is something we can talk about. We're both women, right? And let's say what it is. Environments that are predominantly built by white men don't necessarily, I'm not going to say all because I don't like to generalize, but don't necessarily take into consideration perspectives,
right,
or what's needed, or differences in the way to do things, or what would be better. Don't really take account for that. And that's really in our systems, right, in this country of the way things are. So whether you're, a woman, whether you're Black, Hispanic, Asian, straight, gay, whatever, like if there's any variation of any of those, you actually have to acknowledge that there may be some challenge to if what we've created or what has been created is serving everyone.
Right.
And really serving better performance, better health, better safety, better all of it.
Yeah.
Right?
Is it or isn't it?
So, that's, I think, the challenge is how do we move that so that it creates these environments that are safe and supportive, safe from a physical standpoint of safety, but also supportive for all, and allow that creativity, innovation, self-satisfaction, right? And it really does then create actually better performance and better outcomes because we're all in this together.
Right, right.
And all I'll say is we also could apply that to our communities and society, right?
Everything. It's the same. Any grouping of people together, it's the same thing.
Yeah.
It's exactly the same. And when you said that of how we have to acknowledge it, I think we have to, any group of people, whether it's a work setting, whatever group, it's acknowledging those things and being able to verbalize that and have a dialogue about that.
Yep.
And a dialogue about the fact that, if, when I'm in a room of all white men, that, this is different for me. Mm-hmm. Right? I remember I was with Nestle, I think, and I went to Geneva, and I was a little late with arriving, and I walk in this room and open the door, and there's all these suits, and so they all look at me, and I said, whoa, am I in the conference of men? And they all laughed, but I was just like, oh my gosh, all of you look exactly the same. Suit, tie, everything, and not exactly, but they look all the same.
I understand.
And then here I pop
generally.
in. Wow. You know what I mean? So you have to acknowledge, and that was my way of subtly, but acknowledging that, oh my gosh, and also making my presence known.
Yeah.
And I think it's learning that not to come in quietly always, because I am, I have a position here. I have a place here. And sometimes you need to make that for yourself. You need to put yourself there.
100%. And I think, again, talking about that, we have to at least acknowledge reality and challenge this, right? Is that I think that many people end up falling in line.
Yep.
Rather than coming in as you should and with the power. And actually that would serve others more. And so back to what we were saying earlier, it's my belief that because we don't know who we are, and I'm not saying we, but in general, we are not in touch with that, that also makes it easier for corporations, communities, etc., whatever society to fall in line. Right? If you know who you are, that's when things start rumbling and you're like, no, I'm going to make them know that I'm here, and I'm going to make them know what I think.
Yeah.
And I think we need more of that, to challenge the norms.
Challenging the norms, yes. There are certain parts of me that I have very well established that are... And that I've always felt, especially as a safety professional, as a leader of people, that you have to know certain things about yourself that you will stand on, irrespective of what will happen.
Yes.
That you believe that so much that people know that if she's there, if she's doing that, there's no question about where she stands. And I've had those certain things of knowing within me that have just been completely firm. But then getting deeper into what you're saying, that really knowing and saying, and I thought about this at another podcast that I was doing and the intro of myself, and I thought, they may want to hear the whole kind of rundown that you could see on my LinkedIn or whatever, but that's not who I am. That's not who I am. That's what I've done. And it's part of what's made me who I am. But that's not who I am. And that's even different. That's even deeper to me than knowing that I stood for certain things. It's going deeper and saying that I am this person.
Yes.
And and being comfortable, literally, in who you are.
Yeah.
And finding gratification in that. It's a shift of finding gratification in that versus what you have in kind of corporate world that's achieve, or education that's achieve. It's when you're in yourself.
Yeah.
And understanding even a fraction of that is an achievement in and of itself in reality.
Absolutely. Oh my God, there's so much to unpack there.
Yeah.
Okay, so first off, and I'm sure you'd be in agreement with me on this. In order to be a great leader, you have to know yourself.
Yeah.
And it's not a one and done thing. It's an evolution.
Constant. Yeah.
It's like you've got to look inside. You've got to reflect. And that escapes so many leaders.
Yeah.
Again, if I want to give them the benefit of the doubt, and I want to give them a pass on that, it's kind of not baked in to the structure, right? So we need to change that, right? But it's also, as you said, knowing who you are and getting the gratification in that, and it makes you a better person. And also, being able to get to that is what ends up really, truly making you happy, because you have all of these people have built these levels of success, as you said, next thing, achieve, that are miserable. Miserable. It's what society says is success. It's what is marched around, what people think, what's baked into. We want this next thing. We want this next thing. And there's no meaning behind it whatsoever because it's not about who you are. It's about what you did.
Yeah.
And it's about what you do. So the havings and the doings instead of who you are and what, just being.
Yeah.
And sometimes when I speak about this, people are like, yeah, but that doesn't make money. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
I really believe it can. And I think that's the shift. And I think that's where sometimes people, and I was just driving here, I was talking with my colleague, and I literally said this. I said, I truly believe that when you identify those things that really make you happy, you can actually make money with that.
Yeah, absolutely.
Now, exactly how? I don't know. Right. But just as I believed if I was going to go that direction, I don't need to know how, but that's exactly where we're going. It's the same concept, but it's believing that Yeah, we can. There's a value in that.
And I also think, though, that what I would love to see in my lifetime, and I don't know if we will, is that if we have a norm where in workplaces, even if you don't own your own business, I think what you're saying is having an impact, right? Yeah. Being able to have an impact because it's something that connects to something that you deeply value and that you deeply believe in. That's what we're lacking. That's why, I mean, I remember this moment before I even, left corporate America and started my own thing, where I was sitting at a table at dinner with friends, and one owned a daycare, and had like 60 kids in her care. One was an occupational therapist that worked with disabled children. One was a ultrasound tech, so she's giving people the diagnoses and the means to find out how to get their health back or, identify that problem. And I was like, what impact am I having with the work that I do? Now, I think that what I didn't realize at the time was, as a leader, the way I did lead, I was impacting lives, but I also felt so trapped, and I'm interested to hear if you felt this, so trapped to follow the model of the leadership that was being, deemed appropriate in the corporate space, that I did lead a different way, but if I could really be free to do that, as I am now, and empower others to do, I could have had a bigger impact. But I remember that feeling of what impact am I having? And most people want to impact and contribute to the world and make it a better place, right?
Yeah.
And so we've got to find a way to connect that into our operating system. Mm-hmm. I'm just curious, do you agree with what I just
100%
described?
100%.
Yeah.
So I think if you were to ask people throughout my entire career, even in the military, I remember my first sergeant said to me, he said, "You are the most unmilitary military member I've ever met," because I was never really I wasn't fearful of authority. Mm-hmm. Like the commander would have me come in and sit and just tell him like how things really were, because he was disconnected from, people. And so, but I was just open.
Yeah.
And then, you fast forward me through all of my leadership positions. I've always been the one that is more outspoken, that's
Same.
Driving change that people think this can never happen, it could never be, or that's too hard, or that's and I do it anyway. Yep. Or that it's uncommitted, we do it anyway, or we don't do it anyway. I've always been that, and it's, in some cases I look at that and I think, I think that's a part of who I innately am, of just being super driven like that. But I also feel that I still knew that I had to work within boundaries.
Yeah.
And I'd push those sometimes.
Yeah.
Quite frankly, I'd push them a lot into their very limits.
Yeah. Same.
And then I think actually, when I was towards the end with Amazon, when things happened and I knew there was a way to do it differently, especially when life is what we're really talking about. I could be very direct and very open with what things are, to the point where I think people, that can make people uncomfortable.
Oh, 100%.
Very uncomfortable.
Yeah, 100%.
And where you have to say to yourself, am I willing to step away, or am I willing to take whatever potential outcome or risk could be associated with this?
Right. Understood.
Yeah, I am, because it means that much to me.
Yeah.
And that also has helped me to drive a tremendous amount of change, like huge amounts.
Yep.
But there's also that risk, and there's also that still being confined and working. I think of different leaders that I've worked for, and honestly, just not very many that I felt were like me, or that thought like I think.
Yep.
And so you're working within the confines of the organization, but also sometimes the confines of who you work for.
Right.
And that can be even worse.
Right.
Sometimes.
Well, it's so funny because, when we think about, right, and I talk about this all the time, right? When we think about how people become leaders usually because they're promoted. And they're not promoted because they're great leaders. They're promoted because they were good at their job. That right there is part of the big problem, right? Because we have all these people that are now responsible for leading others and responsible for making things happen, for making people be safe and feel safe, for making people engaged and motivated, for inspiring others. That really is part of the job. Yes, the company wants us to make money, but in order to do that, you've got to do all those things I just mentioned, right?
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then they're doing it with no skills, and they're looking to what's modeled in the company, in our country. And therein is the problem, because the bad models that are there, and you know this, I talk about this in my talk. The bad models are what are followed, and it's perpetuated over and over and over again, right? And I think, and I'm proud of that, to push, because you said it, I did it as well, always push the boundaries. I always did things differently, and I still, many times I was like, am I going to take that risk? How far am I going to push? I had to do it in steps sometimes, you know. And I used to get sometimes reprimanded for that, you know, not following suit, right? But sometimes acknowledge that, wow, you're contentious, you ruffle feathers. But you know, you really do get there's something done that you believe in. You know, things that no one else can get done, you get it done. So it's like interesting why we don't see we collectively don't see the connection in those things. You know, you look in the people who have done things that people said were not possible. You know, in business, it is challenging those norms. It is doing things differently. It is not falling in line.
Right.
It is stepping outside, right? So, you know, you and I are aligned on that. And more, that's part of why I speak on this so much, because I want to normalize that. I want to normalize the pushing the boundaries and making that change to those environments. I really want to go here now with you about, because we're talking about your journey. I will talk about, you know, barriers to becoming a leader, right? And there's many things that we could talk about in line with this, but I really want to talk about, since we both mentioned about, you know, the structures of being a woman, and let's just talk about that angle. I'm curious if you were ever treated, and I know the answer to this already, but I want to hear from you. Were you ever treated differently because you were a woman in how you were behaving, and could you tell me about that?
Oh, for sure. For sure. And I think one thing that was probably consistent throughout pretty much everywhere is seeing that a man could say something with the same level of intensity, and I could say the same thing, but yet I'm loud, I'm angry, I'm, you know, all those typical like stereotypes that are not true. When I'm excited about something, yes, do I get like this? I do.
Yep.
That's me. That's who I am.
Yep.
Right? And that ignites something, and that should tell you that, hey, we're on fire here.
Yeah.
Instead of, like, tamp that down. But Mr. So-and-so here, they could do the same thing in there however they want to do that and use whatever kind of crazy language they want to do. And that's okay. And so you see that, right? And so, and I've seen that. I've watched that with myself. Everywhere. I've seen it happen with other women. You know, it's horrible to see that. And every opportunity that I've had to fight against that, I've fought against that, and I've stood up to that. But that is a lot of work as well.
Yeah.
The weight of that is huge.
Yep.
But have I experienced that? 100%. Do I think that that's ever prevented me from doing the things that I wanted to? Probably not. Do I think that it has impacted maybe in some places, you know, maybe decisions to say, okay, she should be at this level?
Yeah.
For sure it has. For sure it has.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, like, that's one of the things I know when we were chatting before we started recording, which just we're talking about, you know, we have to acknowledge the reality of things. And, you know, I think what's frustrating, for me, and I think you are saying the same, is that it's a lot of work to push that, right? And it's a lot of work to push that, and I'm up for it, but to see it fall on deaf ears. And what I mean is, right, challenging that, and there's many women who say that doesn't exist, or that wasn't my experience, where that may be your experience, or you are just not in touch with what is actually occurring,
right,
and the reality of the situation. I think I have always been told that I'm too loud, I'm too much, I'm too radical. I don't think I don't think anything that I'm saying is radical.
No.
It's just giving me that label to make me step back, because that's always what it's about, is to make me step back. And I'll be damned if I'm going to step back from something that I believe in, right? And for more women like that don't realize what the ecosystem and what the structure of our culture, whether that's in our society, our communities, our country, but also in the container of where you're working, it exists.
Oh, yeah, all over.
It exists.
Yeah. And it perpetuates, because
Absolutely.
then, and people don't realize that if you see that in your home, you see that in TV, you hear that in podcasts, you see this in whatever, and people just, they follow that. And honestly, there's a lot of people that are just followers.
Yep.
And a lot of people that talk about out of touch with who they are, they see someone in a position or with some level of authority, and they take those behaviors and say, okay, that's okay for me now. And they try to do that, and it creates a mess.
Yeah.
And quite frankly, we do have what I would say are some pretty significant messes in companies, in organizations, in the government, all sorts
everywhere.
of things. It's everywhere.
Yeah. Well, the impact of labels is, I think, something that you cannot disregard. And I know myself. I actually I participated in a book where we all wrote a chapter, a story of a label we were given that impacted us negatively, and how we overcame that and transitioned it. So bossy was one that I was always labeled as. And I reframed that to, no, I'm not bossy, I'm decisive. So I'm curious, do you have one that you were always called, and have you gone through that reframing? And tell me about that.
I've probably been called a few.
Yeah, me too.
I think the first thing that comes to mind is aggressive. But to me, how I look at that is that I'm a visionary, and I'm tenacious, and I just believe. And so if you want to call that aggressive, that I'm going to carve the path to go there and make the way for not just me, but for others to, then fine, call me aggressive. But, and also I would challenge too is there anything wrong with being aggressive for things that are actually for the health and safety of people?
Yeah.
Like, tell me that.
Yeah.
Sometimes I think some people need to be a little bit more aggressive with what their expectations are, or what they want to do. I think the other, is even being called a bully because of, and I think that is in a couple different things that are added to being a woman that is a leader, that is intense, that is very decisive, very just to the point, and has high expectations. If I'm expecting you to do your job, that does not constitute being a bully.
Right.
Even if you don't like how that is.
Right.
Well, you still have to do your job. Now, we can work on however we need to work on to make you feel better with this. And I'll either make sure that you actually have all the capability that is needed. Resources that you need. And even how we communicate. I'm willing to do it. But at the end of the day, there's that other part that if you have a job to do, you have a job to do. That's your job, right? And as a leader, you do have to hold people accountable to that.
Absolutely.
And that's not a negative. That's actually saying, I'm in reality, if you flip it, it's like, I'm actually trying to help you be what you're actually meant to be.
Yeah.
That you're not.
Right.
And in reality, if you were, you'd probably feel a lot better about what you're doing than worrying about, whatever else.
Yeah. But I also think, in what you said before, is that the same behaviors that you're taking to get things done and be able to lead people to an outcome if it were a man that were portraying those same behaviors, as you said earlier, that's celebrated, right?
Oh, yeah.
And so I think we need to pay more attention to that, and we need to push that, and we need to and listen, I don't want to say we're focusing on women. There's so many other groups, right, where this is a part of this conversation, just the inequality and difference in treatment or, good, bad judgment, whatever. But we need to at least acknowledge what we are perpetuating and what we're supporting.
Right.
And the only way we change that is by changing our perspective on what is, right? And removing the judgment and looking at it for what's the intention. So much to unpack there, but when you talk about, having the conversation with somebody to actually help them get their job done, right? And the way that I've also been labeled as very direct.
Yeah, that's the word, direct.
Right?
Yeah.
Direct. But direct to me, that's kind of a good thing, no?
Yeah.
But I get it, right?
Yeah.
I get it. But I am trying to help you, right? I call them authentic conversations. I care about you so much that if I'm not able to have this conversation with you, then I'm not helping you. And I'm not going to miss that chance to help you do more. So as a leader, I think you've gotta be able to ride that line, right? Mm-hmm. But also, really, what we're talking about here is being able to be recognized for the strength that you have, rather than torn apart because you exude strength versus a man, which would be like par for the course, oh yeah, he's awesome. He really gets things done.
And you're like,
okay. Yeah. I mean, we have to acknowledge reality.
Yeah.
So, I also think for women, it's important, as we were saying earlier, to take your seat, to stand up and let them know that you're there.
Yeah.
Right? And don't fall in line, right? And that's going to be even more important now, right? Is to be able to make your mark. We've got to acknowledge that we are being programmed by the messages and the examples that we are shown each and every day in our culture, in our news, in our entertainment. Everybody rolls their eyes. Well, I shouldn't say that. Most white people, maybe, and men, roll their eyes when we talk about representation. But representation is important.
It's hugely important.
Because if you are not seeing women as strong leaders, you're seeing, somebody who's strong, is the B word. I'm going to say it, is a bitch, right? Yeah. And you see those characters that somebody who is strong is portrayed that way. Mm-hmm. Okay, now that's contributing to the programming. And, I don't want to be like that, Mm-hmm. So we've got to push that. We've got to change that because it's having an impact on perpetuating this bad model and this ecosystem that is judging people for things that are actually qualities and talents.
Exactly. Can I just share, when you said, what was the exact thing that you said that just triggered in my mind about between men and women and their capabilities? There was, I listened to just a fraction of an announcement on one of the new cabinet members, and there's a woman that has, and I don't know the names of people, but a woman that's being appointed that President Trump, or the to-be President-elect Trump, appointed a woman to a position. And then there's a man that was appointed to a position that's similar. And he came on and he said, I'll take, these things off her back. I'll take these things off her back. And I thought to myself, and they were kind of talking about, in general, the conversation was about, the qualifications of different people. But that fragment stuck with me because I thought, okay, it's the first woman that's ever been in a position like this. And then immediately following, we have this person that's also going to be put in their similar roles, or they'll collaborate together. He comes on and says how he'll be able to take these things off her back, off her shoulder, automatically. And that really struck me because I thought, isn't that so much of what happens on a regular, I don't know who this is, but if it were me, I'd say, well, I'm perfectly capable.
Yeah.
So hang tight.
Yeah.
Big man, because this is my job.
Yeah.
And I don't need you to take things off. So it's taking it off, trying to make it like, oh, I'm a help, I'm a good thing. You know what I mean? It was just it really caught me that just that simple dialogue there. I thought there's a lot in that.
Yeah.
That on one hand, this is like a hidden. It's like some might say, well, that's a really great thing. Well, it depends on how you look at it.
Yeah. Well, let's go there. You know what? Let's go there.
Okay.
Let's go there. You know, even, and I'm going to call it out. There's so many women that I have spoken to that talked about a woman leading this country. Women that I have spoken to, and I know there's a lot of men that feel that way. We get that. Mm-hmm. But women who actually are saying or have said that a woman doesn't have the ability to take a stance and be strong when it comes to other world leaders. Are you freaking kidding me? Are you freaking kidding me?
Yeah.
As a woman, if you're not unraveling that bias, because that's a big thing for me, right? And I'm sure for you as well. Listen, I also teach this. Bias is a daily job.
It is.
It's a daily job.
Everyone.
To unravel. I've done a lot of work to unravel my own bias. I still have to challenge myself every single day. And as a society, we have to acknowledge that.
Yes.
We have to acknowledge that. It is in our human nature that we prejudge people. We do. Mm-hmm. So you've got to be aware of it. And you've got to be aware, especially in all cases, but here in this instance, you are actually hurting yourself as a woman to make a statement like that. Mm-hmm. And if you're making a statement like that, you're under the spell.
Yeah.
You're under the spell.
You're exactly where some people want you to be.
You're under the spell.
Yeah.
And that's because you've probably heard those messages your whole life. Mm-hmm. You've been treated that way. And I'm just talking about women right now. We could apply this to any other minority group, meaning not white male, right? Yeah. You're battling that, and if you're contributing to the perpetuating that, we got to stop that. You know?
Yeah.
What is it that, I mean, there are so many other countries that had a woman lead.
That have had or have?
Had or
like
have.
All over the world.
Lead. All over the world.
Yeah.
What the hell are we doing?
Yeah. And you know what's interesting? Let's just, if you don't mind that I just get
let's
really
go there.
specific here. I mean, take Kamala Harris.
Yeah.
Vice President Kamala Harris. Quite frankly, she's the most qualified presidential candidate, like nearly ever, based on all of her achievements, her education, her even position as a vice president, her work with world leaders, driving large-scale change that have actually changed from a largest state in the country position that's impacted the entire country and other parts of the world. What more do you want? And at the end of the day, my real belief is that there are people who they truly don't see a woman, and certainly not a woman that looks like her, Black, Asian, Indian, anything. They're not okay with that. They don't think, they're not looking at the capabilities and the qualities and the character and the leadership, all of those things, and saying, that's it.
Well, listen, whether you like her or not, right, isn't the issue.
Yeah.
It's what is the qualifications, right? What is the qualifications, and give her due. Yeah. And I think what you're explaining, and I totally agree with you, that a lot of it is just bias 101. Mm-hmm. And I don't, obviously this is a topic that we have a big problem with that in this country. I mean, the world does too, but in this country in particular, I think we've gone backwards. Mm-hmm. So what can we do as human beings? We have to unravel that. And we have to at least call it for what it is. Mm-hmm. I've had women say to me, I don't like her. Why? Well, here's the thing. It's not about the party. It's not about the person. We want to talk about this from a standpoint of bias. Why? There's no reason.
Yeah.
There's no reason given. You don't even have one. You haven't even contemplated. I don't know. I just don't like her. What does that even mean? You know, you could apply that to so many other situations, right? Yeah. Well, I don't like her because she's too strong, right? In a workplace environment. I don't like her. She's too strong. She's aggressive. But the male candidate, you'd be like, he's strong, so he's good, right? Yep. So we have to speak about reality here. Reality,
and that happens. You think about, like, when you said that, it just brought me back to the times that I'd sit in a room and we're doing performance evaluations, and you're going through hundreds and hundreds of people, and part of it, you learn, like, what are the biases to, like, watch for. And you can see it and you can hear it in people. And it does, some things come down to that, a recency bias, or the halo effect, or something like that is just like, oh, I like that person. Well, time out here. Let's look at look at their work. Yeah. And I've done this as an exercise with teams of, let's take the names out of this. Let's just look at their performance. Look at what they've delivered. Look at how they've met their goals and objectives with irrespective of names. So you don't know who these people are. But look at that. Yep. And then make your decision. And wow, interesting. And that really shows how much of a bias you can have.
I mean, bias comes into play. And like I said, we have to talk reality here. We have to acknowledge what is. That happens every single day. Yeah. It happens in this election. It happens in where we're going, for sure. And, my own work to unravel my own bias has been quite astounding for myself, because even when I thought that I had unraveled everything, I was presented with other situations where I hadn't dug deep in that. So my question is, what are we doing as a society to ensure that we're facing that? I think, unfortunately, because of what we opened with, because people don't know who they are and what they really value. They like to tell a story of what they value. But they're not in touch with who they are, that it detracts or decreases their ability to really make decisions that are supporting people, that are not biased, that, all of those things. And I think a lot of people just are not willing to do the work. And as a leader, not only do you have to do that work yourself, and whether you're a leader in a company, leader in your town, leader in your family, you've got to do that work. Because without that, you're just perpetuating the same, and what's keeping us stuck, quite frankly. Yeah. I don't, have a lot of tolerance for people that want to keep things the same. That's part of my operating system. That's how I lead. That's how I do business. Same is no good. Okay. So, we've got to be challenging ourselves to understand why we think the things we think, and to your comment, if you're doing a performance evaluation, you've probably heard recency bias. You've probably heard the halo effect. Some have not, which blows my mind. Yeah. But as human beings that live in a society like we do, really the global society where people are different, you've got to understand all that and how bias works. So I don't know where we go from here except to keep talking about this and help. That's my mission. You probably as well, is to be thought-provoking and be thoughtful about how I'm serving and the conversations that we highlight, so that we can help people kind of unravel that and really digest information that's going to help them think about it.
Right. And I think, you've said this a lot, is continuing to do that for yourself. Yeah. And I too have, in fact, just recently come across bias that it kind of surprised me in a way. And if I can share one quick story about that. So I was, my neighbor she has an official position in the community. She invited me to an event for a Democratic group that has formed in the area where I live. And so I went to this meeting, and she introduced me to people and running for Congress and all these different people. And we kind of stood aside for a little bit, and I'm looking over people as they're getting things to eat or whatever. And I said to her, I said, you know what? I said, if I didn't know that you brought me to a place that was a Democratic group, I would look at this group and make a judgment. I said that to her because I realized for myself right then, I thought, Marla, you would. You'd look at this group of people, how they look, and you'd say, surely, they can't be, I would have never thought that they were Democrats. I never would have. And I said that to her, and we just had a little bit of dialogue about that. But that's I've kept that running in my head to say, I have to look at that.
Yeah.
And I share that because we all have that. And it's so important when you see it to say, what caused me to do that? And I've really kept that in my mind of what is it that caused me to look at it that way.
Listen, as human beings, we have to acknowledge fact. And I know that's a dicey thing in our society today.
Yeah, facts, like real facts.
But we have to acknowledge fact. Human beings, to gain understanding, this is your education here, right, have to categorize. The human brain has to categorize. Yeah. That's how it works. Because of that, there is a danger and there's a tendency that if we rely on those generalizations too heavily, that's where prejudging comes in.
Right.
And we do that. And sometimes prejudging is for bad. It's like you find the bad. Or sometimes it's for good. So there was a commercial a long time ago. Not that long ago, maybe 10 years ago. And they took a DJ who had dreads, and he was white, but he had dreads, and he had tattoos, and they cleaned him up, they cut his hair, they put him in a suit, you couldn't see any of his tattoos or anything, and they sat him in a room with people who were coming for financial advice. And he was talking to them and blah, 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 and this and that. And he's like, well, so what do you think? Do you want to, do some investments? And they're like, yeah. And he's like, shows them the video of himself before. He's like, I'm really a DJ.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And that's an example which I love because it's not from the negative, right?
Right.
It shows the positive, like I'm attributing positive qualities to this person that they don't deserve or are even valid. And it's simply based on how he's dressed, how he presents himself, what he says he is, claims to be.
Right.
So there's a lot in that
There's
there,
a lot.
Pact, right?
That's like just like all about what we were talking about society is like this.
Because now, if you see that,
yes,
you do the same thing with somebody who isn't what they say they are.
Exactly.
Who, just because something they said, you think they're this, or just because the way they look, you think they're this. Yeah. And it's a sheep, in wolf's clothing, right? Is that what the word? Is that the expression?
A sheep
in wolf's
clothing.
No, a wolf in sheep's clothing.
In sheep's clothing, yeah, that's it. But they can't. And how many people get taken advantage of because someone says, because some people say, well, that's brilliant. I don't need to know that. I just need to appear like that. Because society will accept that. Society will gravitate towards that. They do that. Yeah. And that's how people, unfortunately, it's terrible. Some get really taken advantage of in situations like that. It's so true.
Well, we have to keep pushing forward, that's for sure. But before we close, we didn't get into your Leaders Take Action hashtag. And I really want to highlight what you were able to achieve. And before we do, I just want to say one other thing. You talked about your experience being in safety, right? And you're literally responsible for people's safety. But I'd also like to submit, because I say this all the time, as leaders, and again, leaders are not just people who have a role. Leaders are everybody. Leaders can be everybody. We all should be taking a leadership role to impact humans and people around us. And stand up for things and show people, inspire people to do better, to help them, all of those things. Those are all parts of leadership. But my belief is that you are responsible for the safety of others, whether that's physical safety, like it was your role, or the safety of others. Creating a safe place, not just compliance with so they don't get hurt physically,
right?
Safe places and places where people belong,
right?
So they don't get hurt,
right?
Here and here.
Yeah.
So tell me about your work with, and that was while you were at Amazon, correct? And the Leaders Take Action hashtag Leaders Take Action, and how that came to be, because I think it's an important part that really to end on really encapsulates everything we're talking about and your work, which was so transformative.
Right. Well, and you heard part of it in my talk with Speak. But it was really triggered. And I'll step this back. But I had been working on what I call representation within an organization since when I joined Amazon, and this was the second time I was joining Amazon in 2017, because when I joined, I was one of 5 LA Black women in the entire organization. I didn't know this. Someone tapped me on the shoulder and told me. I was like, what? But there were 5, and I'm thinking, oh my gosh, and this is a worldwide organization, and that's it. So, and then I saw the organization, and when you have hundreds of thousands of associates from all over, you have men, women, you have every race, religion, color, every language, all sorts of different things. You can't have just a group of leaders or people in positions of authority or people in positions of support that don't have any connection with them.
Yeah.
And connection is huge.
Yeah.
So I had already been trying to do that, tons of interviews to bring in safety professionals, then to bring in women, then to bring in people, a variety of different backgrounds. But the trigger for really pushing, harder and faster was George Floyd and his death. And because that was so powerful. Yeah. And because, and much like now, people say, some things never change. And I think we can never lose hope that things will change, but we have to be in certain things like this that are huge societal big issues. Pay attention to the very small things that change. And it's small piece by small piece by small piece, chip away, chip away, chip away. Kind of like what Vice President Harris said in her concession speech. It's not, the fight's not over.
Yeah.
Right. It continues, and it's just piece by piece. But that's what really pushed it, and that was one of those moments where we were going to make a change.
Yeah.
Period. End of story. And gathering a group of people together. And I think that's important as well, is when you gather a group of people together that can help drive a change, that's powerful. So it's not just the leader that's in a position per se, but it's with other leaders at varying different levels that are all about a same collective mission.
Yeah.
And saying and sharing experiences. So we started that with a lot of just open dialogue. What are people really feeling? I only shared just a couple questions in my talk, but it's powerful when you say, how many people have you interviewed with that look like you? I haven't had one in my entire life. And I had said before that I was going to make sure that when people came in, when I was hiring people, that they would see a face that was reflective of them, whether it be me as a woman, as a Black woman, as a veteran, or whatever, everything that I am, so that they could have a connection. And do you know how many people said to me, they'd say, can I ask you just a real question? I always knew what those real questions were. And then one of two things. I would either being a woman or being Black. And I wanted to be able to speak to that. And I wanted to be able to tell them that they were coming into an organization with a leader that valued that recognized that, so that they could come in and say, I have a place. And I can have success. And I'm not alone. And it doesn't mean that everything will be easy, but that things can actually change. And wow, like you look today at how much it has changed. And in that, our initiative with the Workplace Health and Safety Organization, we drove significant change. And it literally changed the faces of the leaders of the organization. Before I left, I made it a point. I hired 4 directors, all diverse leaders, all diverse. And that was I had to do that.
Mm-hmm.
I had all these different goals that was my final one that I had to put, because I wanted, knowing that I was leaving that I wanted to have people at that level that they could look at and say, if you can do that, I can do that.
Absolutely.
And how many young leaders, young women would say, you're the one that motivates me to say, we can do that. I can do that. I can be that. And that's powerful. And hearing people, I actually, one of the people that was on the team, she's with another company now, and she shared with me that she had tried to use part of the hashtag Leaders Take Action and bring that in. Now she's hit with a little bit of resistance, but she's the type of person that she's going to keep moving that. Another Black woman that's going to try to drive that. And that was a huge action for that moment. But it also impacted people, and I'm hearing them take that and do that here and here and here and here. And that's really the most valuable part about being a leader and driving an impact, is that the impact continues.
Yeah. When
it is real and it is good and you've really engaged the hearts and minds of people, they take it. Yeah. And then it's not just that space that we were in that time. It's wherever they're going. And they're doing those things.
And it's stepping outside in that ripple effect of what it does, because you're, as I said earlier, you're responsible for that person's safety and really for their life.
Yeah.
Because by engaging and making them see what is possible and treating them in a way where they feel connected, they feel like they're part of a community, they feel like they belong.
Right. They have a voice.
Not only creates such power, momentum, and things that actually then help a company make money and be successful and grow, then it creates that impact of spreading that to not only themselves, those people that are there working with you, but then the lives of others, because that's the ripple effect.
Right.
And I think a lot of us do not, a lot of people do not value how much of an impact that can have. You talked about being a leader. Agreed that leaders have to take that, but my mission is to say that we are all capable of doing that. We all can step up as leaders.
We all make a choice of whether we will or won't.
Right, choosing to do that. And you look at so many examples of where change happens. Most change doesn't happen from the top down. It actually happens from the middle out or up. And now, more than ever, that's what we need to do.
Right. Bring those in and give them the platform to go up.
Absolutely.
100% agree.
Marla, this has been awesome. I could talk to you all afternoon.
Thank you. Likewise.
Thank you so much for being here, and thank you for sharing your story, and thank you for sharing your wisdom. I look forward to talking more with you, and perhaps doing this again on a part 2.
That would be great. Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. Thanks, everybody, for joining us today. I hope you have found this conversation valuable and thought-provoking. We will see you the next time on the next episode here on Finding the Upside. Thanks.